Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. This one's going to be about geometry nodes, just materials, how to assign materials, change materials, and what you can do with it. So without further ado, let's begin. First, let's always start with, just a simple object. So you always need an object to add materials and geometry nodes through the modifier. So here we are. Now this cube has it. So if we go to material preview, we see it just has this default whitish gray thing because there's no material. So first, let's add a material. And it's still whitish gray, so let's change this to red. And we'll change the color here to red, and you'll see we now have a red cube. So if we go here to the geometry nodes tab, we'll see we have the material here, and we have a material assign, material replace, and select by material. So let's go with material assign. You'll see that our geometry returns to that whitish gray, and then we select our material. That being said, we can also create a new material. Let's call this green. Is this the green? And we can select the green, and now it's green. Red is red, green is green. We could also do this, say, if we add a mesh primitive UV sphere, join these two up. Not there actually, so let's join them before the material. Or would it be? Yeah, it would be after. Sorry, order of operations is still a little bit tricky to me. Let's give it a transform and move it up, and you'll see it. And then let's give it a material assign, change to green. And now we have two different materials assigned to two different objects. And while to create a material, you do need to create it at first here, but after it's created, you could get rid of them in the material panel here, and you still have them available here. And if you go to the shader node and select them, it'll just be added back in. You could change, okay, I want the green to be shinier, and I want the red to be, rougher, blah blah blah, all that shit. So let's go back to geometry nodes, and that's the first example, the most basic example of assigning materials. But we could also assign materials based on the selection. So say we subdivide this cube, and we select a part here. Let's actually go into face mode and select that part, and in the vertex group, assign that to a group. Here we'll see our group, put it in, and it's now going to be assigned that red. But if we change to green, we'll see only the green is assigned there. So if we now change that back to red, go here, select green, or add a new material, call it blue, we'll see only that section that we've selected with the vertex is blue. And make sure like everything's assigned, because as you saw there, and not everything was assigned. And we could easily change this to green or create a new material. The only thing that I would think would be better in for geometry nodes here is the ability to create a new material from this node, but that's for a future build, I guess. So that's the first basic example on how to use the material assign. Well, on to the next one. Alright, in this next one, we're gonna once again bring back our cube, give it a red material, name this red, nothing too complicated. Change this to geometry nodes, add the node network, and now we're gonna do material replace. So in with this node, you see we have old and new. So we will need another geometry here. So let's create green. And let's create blue. So here we see, okay, we want to replace the red with the blue. And you'll see, okay, we've changed any instance of the red material into blue. What does that mean? Well, if we take our material sign here and assign green, you see nothing, this node is ignored because there's no red material to change it into the blue material. However, if we go subdivide this mesh so we have a selection, let's select this part up here, add it into the vertex group, and select it here. You'll see only the default, because the first material is red that we've added, the default is red. So let's actually change this to red and change the rest of the material to green. And you'll see only this blue part here remains because the red here is being replaced. Any instance of the red material is being replaced by the blue material as per this node. And this can be useful in different situations. There is no input here for a attribute or anything like that, so you will have to mess around with it and maybe use some mesh joins and stuff to make it look good, but this is pretty useful. And so now let's continue on to the next one, which we'll just reset our things here, and it's select by material. Now this one might not be visually, I don't know, like visually you won't see what's happening here if you just add it in. So let's quickly add material assign, give it red, and then a material assign green and give it that group. So these are being selected for the vertex weight, by vertex weight. Keep in mind that vertex groups are weight paints essentially. So if I were to go into weight paint, you'll see this. It does have a fall off, so that's why the bottom groups are selected, because of the fall off. It's not straight up. So if we go back to material mode in EV, so let's select by material. Actually, this has to go after the material is applied, so we want to select the green material. Anything that's green using this material will be selected and output it to this attribute that we just created, selection. We'll call it that. Now, you won't see anything. Nothing's changed until we add something like a point distribute node and give it the selection. And you'll see if we add a mix node, so we get our geometry back, you'll see the points here are only on where that green material is. We change this to Poisson, increase the density. You'll see that it's only distributed there. So if we add a point distribute node, not point distribute, sorry, point instance node after, and let's grab a cylinder down and put our cylinder in there. We also want to scale that down a bit, so let's do a point scale. You'll see our cylinders only appear where this green is, and that's because it's selecting by the material. if our green per se were, so let's select remove. Let's change to over here. You'll see our green material is only in the centerpiece, and with that, our selection. If I were to change this to red, it will be anywhere but the green. And if I were to change this to blue, it would be nowhere because blue is not a material on this. And that's the basics of the 3 materials nodes so far in Blender 3.0 as of recording. So now let's get to something a bit more complicated. Alright guys, so we're gonna start by making something a little bit more complicated. So we're gonna bring in our cube, we're gonna go into geometry nodes, add it in, create our material. So we want a red material, and just put this to red, a green, or gren, whatever you wanna put in, green material. And then we're gonna add 2 more. One is gonna be the blue material that we've had before. And the other one will be different. So we want a transparent BSDF shader and call it transparent. Now in order for this to work with Eevee, make sure to change your viewport display to alpha blend and your shadow mode to none, and this will avoid future problems in the when we see it in Eevee. If it's in cycles, you don't need to change that, but if you want to preview it in Eevee through the material preview, you will need to change that. So first, we already know about the 3 materials here, nodes here, but if you've seen my previous video, we were talking, well, not my previous video, 2 videos ago or so, about the switch node. Now, there's been some changes to this where we can now change texture, material, and a couple of other things, I think. But we now have materials. So yeah, that means we can switch between any of these materials that have been created. But what does this mean? How do we put this in? As you can see, there is no green input for this geometry. Well, that's because, well, first let's input the switch so we have the output. That's because we need to assign it to a material assign, or anything with this reddish, pinkish output. So let's put this in here and assign our materials. We want the default to be green and our switch to be red. And you'll see our material switches. Now if we subdivide this mesh as we always do, make our selection here, add it into a vertex group, and select that group, you'll see that green is only centered on there. The rest of the material is a default material that we can just, for good practice, material assign, give it red, or let's give it blue. That way we can see the difference. And if we switch this node, we'll see we only switch what's in this group. And we can keyframe that too. Now, you could already see like maybe a changing sign, emission material, whatever. So if we assign a material replace, we can say, okay, I want every instance of green be replaced by a transparent. You see though, nothing happens because, well, green doesn't exist until we switch back. And you can see it's now transparent because we replaced every instance of green with a transparent, with transparency. Now what if we don't want this? We want to have control over this node. Well, we're gonna need another switch. So let's change here, change this to transparent, and add that underneath here, and add a new switch output. So now we can change, okay, I want this to change from green to red. Okay, no, I want it to change from red to transparent. And that's how you build up your node networks for materials. you find different ways to add them together, to find different ways to assign vertexes and stuff like that. So now that we understand the material nodes that have been available at this point, at least the ones that I could find, and that are fairly simple to use, let's start building up something a little bit more complicated. So let's add in a cube again, because a cube is the favorite thing. Let's first subdivide, because we will be needing these subdivisions. So let's give it a FD of 15, just because I want some geometry. Let's add in the geometry node network, and let's add in 3 material slots, the last one being a transparent. So let's quickly change red, green, blue. We look here, it's going to be blue. Alright, so first thing we want to do, well, we want to assign a material. So what is our default material? I want it to be red. I want the entire base thing to be red. This is going to be our first material. Now, what I want is for a dynamic vertex selection. So I want this cube, which we will turn into a wired view and turn off all ray visibilities so it doesn't show up in our renders. I want this cube to control where that green will be outputted. So with that, we're going to need a vertex group. Let's call this selection. Alright, but now we're going to need to know the proximity of this cube to this one based on the geometries. So we're going to need an attribute proximity node. And we're also going to need to take this cube in, just drag it in. So we will need our geometry and our target geometry. I want it to output its distance to selection. And well, after that, I want to add a material assign and pick selection, go into the green. You'll see, well, it's all green. What have we done wrong? Well, we haven't really done anything wrong. We just have to add a attribute color ramp. If we go into here, because what we're going to be using back into solid view, we're going to be using what is known as vertex colors. So we need to go to the vertex colors, add col, which is just color. So we want to put our selection to col. And now you'll see that our face here is turning black and there's a line. Now you can control with this color ramp how sharp something is. I like to keep it on constant because it is still based off of geometry either way. So you'll see you want to mess around with it a bit until it looks alright to you. What you can do as well is on the cube add a solidify modifier and shrink that down till it's pretty much solid black. And now you'll see, okay, so if I go here, everything should be fine. Nope, because it's outputting that information to col. We need to output it back into selection. Or actually, can we? Yeah, we could just put col in here and it'll work. But you'll see it's there, but it's inverted. I want what's in the cube to be the green. Easiest way to do that, if we go back to our solid view with the vertex view selected, the color ramp, and then just mess it from there. Anything that's white will be the green, anything that's black will be the red. And you see we want to just constantly be messing with this until we get more or less what we want. Maybe mess with that a little bit. Yeah, I don't like that it considers any object hollow. It doesn't consider it as a full object, and I don't know how to fix that, but I'm just showing you the concepts. You could probably take it further than I ever can, just because I'm not that amazing with geometry nodes. But you can see, you now have something that is controlled by this cube. And it's switching about. So what else can we do? Well, we can add a switch node and maybe change that green to something else. So let's go utility switch. I want to switch materials. Let's put the output material here, and the output we want green. Change to transparent. Of course, we forgot we need to change the viewport display to alpha blend. Otherwise, that would happen. None. And then you see that the anything that this cube is covering turning transparent. If we were to get rid of this modifier, you'll see that for some reason it leaves that behind. I'm not quite sure how to fix that. Maybe something like that. Yeah, just extruding it, it seems to have worked. And you see, takes into consideration the proximity of the geometry. You switch it back to green. Not only that, we could also switch on the switch. So if we not there, we could add another switch function and say, okay, I want to switch this transparent material here to this blue material. So you'll see if we switch it with the green on, nothing will happen because it's not outputted into the green. But if we switch this to the transparent material and then switch here, we'll switch to the blue. So you can see we have secondary switching. And that's pretty interesting. What else we can do? Well, we can also add let's add a UV sphere. And let's put this object into here, and we can then go out and change what we want to be our brush per se. Well, this is kind of like dynamic paint in a way, which is cool. So there we go. Now you know the basics of having object selections, getting into coal, which is just color. You can really rename this to whatever you want, but coal is just the default that you create with. Now, you could also change here to points, which will just mean that it's detecting the vertices of this object. Edges, just the edge lines. You see, it's ignoring the faces here, or faces, which just it's the most it has the most coverage. And you'll see that it's detecting all of the faces here. So yeah, that is how you use material nodes, and obviously you can probably be more complicated than this. You can let's go into the shader. You might be wondering actually how to texture this. Well, because this is still using this cube, you can texture this by just going cube projection and adding a texture. Let's go to let's go to a Musgrave texture here, and it'll be you can use the UVs. But if you're instancing an object, like let me give you an example. If I go, okay, I don't want to use this geometry, I want to use my own geometry made here, so let's use a cylinder. If I were to go back into the shader, go here, go to UV, you'll see it's black. Why? Because as of right now, there's no way of getting UV information from geometry nodes created objects. So if you add anything from this mesh primitives, I haven't seen a way to get a UV unwrap, so you can't use the UV feature. This means you can't really put in textures like image textures the same way you would on a regular object that you're able to UV unwrap, because this object is still a cube in the end. If I were to it doesn't matter how many times I unwrap this cube or how I do it, it doesn't affect this object. But you would be needing to use object, generated, or whatever, and make your own procedural materials. So say, okay, I have that, put that into roughness. You see now the blue has a texture on it. If I were to go back to geometry nodes, change this back into a cube. Since this is a cube I created inside of Blender by pressing in Shift A, I am able to UV unwrap that, go into shader, I am able to use the UV, and I am able to get texture image and open up my image. So let's go to my texture folder, let's find ice, and we see here it's UV unwrapped. And we could add this into, say, the roughness, and we have an image texture that's controlled by this blue. And if we wanted to, we can switch that to transparency, and you'll see nothing. And let's do one more switch, because I have a lot of fun with this switching function. So our base material here is this red material. We want to be able to switch that to the green, because we created the green for a reason. So let's have here green, and add this into the last switch node, and let's reorganize this because it is a little bit of a mess. Where's nodes? Oh, it's here. Why isn't here it is, groups. I always forget that. Move this up, and now we can change the green. Maybe change the green to be an emission material. Have it be green, and if we change this to cycles, we'll see. Now we have a green material that glows. And let's switch it back. Now we have a red material that doesn't. And blue there, green there. See? We could change what is who is affecting what. And that's the fun of geometry nodes. Having everything procedural, we can change this back to material or object, whatever you like. We're done with Vertex. And I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration slash tutorial, because it did go on a little bit longer than I thought. And it's mostly just me experimenting, so I hope you've enjoyed it and that you've had a good time. Anyways, see y'all later. Bye!